Hello, my name is Paolo, this over here is Milo, and today we're going to make a shader for dissolving objects. Dissolving can be really useful because you generally don't want to just disappear a 3D object, you don't want it to just like pop out of existence, so dissolve is a nice way to make like either a transition in or a transition out for an object. So we'll be working on changing the material for this little guy. So right now he's just using a standard universal render pipeline material, and as you can see it doesn't have a lot of stuff going on, it's essentially just a base map. The metallic doesn't have anything. You can press Ctrl and then click on this, and that shows you what is in every channel. So you can see R, G, B are all empty, but the A actually has something, and that is the smoothness. So down here you can see the source of smoothness is metallic alpha, which is basically this little thing here. And then it has a normal map, and that's it. That's only has those three little textures. So we can easily recreate that. So let's make a shader for that. So to do that, just right click, create, then go into shader, universal render pipeline, and we're gonna go for a lit shader graph. Now let's call this dissolve. Then you can right click on it and say create and material. Since we want to match this initial state, a good way to start is make a copy of it, put it right next to it, and then drag the new material that we have into the middle one. And we're going to try and make something that both of them look the same. This is the layout I like to use when I'm working materials. I like having my big shader graph over here and then having the game running on this side so I can preview the material changes I make. So as we saw, that one only had 3 different textures. One was for the base color, so we can start there and then do sample texture 2D. And then over here we can add texture 2D, and let's call this just albedo. Let's add another one. Let's call this the normal. And finally let's add one last one to include the metallic. Once we have that, we can drop the albedo over here, connect it. So let's do that for the rest. Create node, sample texture 2D. We're gonna have to do this the same thing a couple times. For the one that's used for the normal, we gotta change the type from default into normal. Hook it up over there. And last but not least, let's do the same for the metallic. As we saw on the other material, the metallic actually includes a metallic value, which is just 0 at the moment. But it also includes in it the smoothness, and that's the one that we really care about. So once we have the metallic, we can just hook up R, red, into the metallic, which as we saw is just a black texture at the moment, so it won't do anything. And then the alpha, which has the smoothness, we hook up to the smoothness. Simple as that. We save it. As you see, it now updated, and it looks a little crazy because it's super reflective. But let's not worry too much about it. Once we hook up the materials, it'll be fine. Actually, it looks kind of cool. So select the material, right-click, properties. So this is our new material. As you can see, all the textures are empty, and this is the old material. So we can just click on this, and that'll take us to the different textures that we can use. So just drag and drop, click on the metallic, drop it in there, and finally the normal. As you can see, it looks slightly different, and that's because in the case of the original, the base map also had a tint that we didn't include. So let's do that now. So to add a color, we can go here and then click on color, and then we can just drop it in here, add a multiply, and then hook up the sample texture that we had for our albedo and replace that on the exit. Simple as that. And if we compare the materials now, we have the color black, which was the default we had when we saved it first. So we can click on the color that the other material has, copy the hexadecimal color, and then paste in the new one. And there we go. We made a brand new material, but it looks exactly like the other one. So now that we have it looking the same, I'm gonna restart so that I can remove this clone. Excellent, so now we have our material hooked up. It looks like it used to. Now we need to make it dissolve. So first step for that is I'm gonna add a little float here. I'm gonna call this dissolve. And I'm gonna set this on the node settings. You can set how you wanna control this. By default, I'm gonna leave it at 0, which means no dissolve. and then I'm gonna set it to be a slider from 0 to 1. So at 1 it will be fully dissolved, at 0 it will be not dissolved. Since we'll want to make part of our mesh disappear, we gotta go into the settings for the graph. So in the graph settings, you go into alpha clip. Let's turn that on. So with alpha clipping, what it means is basically it can only be on or off. You cannot have things that are like a little transparent. If your value is anything above 0.5 will be visible, anything below will be invisible, and there will be no in-betweens. Since right now the alpha is defaulting to 1, everything is visible all the time. So let's make a quick change for that to not be the case. Right click, create node, and I'm gonna add a simple noise in here. And we got this right now, it's really staticky, so I'm gonna reduce the scale of it to like a 50. I know it looks more like the noise from like a Perlin cloud noise. And I can hook up that to alpha, and then if I save, you'll see now there's a whole bunch of holes in there. Anything that's below 0.5 is becoming invisible. Anything that's above 0.5 is becoming visible. And to make this a little better, I'm going to drop the dissolve over here. We can hook this up into the alpha clip threshold, so it's not always a static 0.5. And when we save, our thing is back. And now we can look at the material that we have, and we have our little dissolve here. And as we move it, you can see everything starts disappearing. There you go. That's the most basic of the solves that you can make. So let's try and make it a little fancier. The next cool thing that you've probably seen in a lot of games is basically adding like a little bit of an edge to this so that it has like an outline. So let's over here grab a new float, call this edge width, and then another one for this time a color, and we're going to call this edge color. And let's change the settings of the node, so you can go into node settings. Let's change this by default to maybe like a 0.1. Change the mode to a slider. 0 to 1 seems pretty good. And the edge color, I want to change it to an HDR because I probably want to make it glow a little bit. And by default, I don't want it as black. Let's make it like a little, let's make it a mint, because why not? So what we'll do is from this point here, since we need to basically offset it a little bit, we're going to subtract. We're going to subtract the edge width, which is just a float. Hook it over here. As you can see, this one's a little darker than this one because the edge width by default is set to 0.1. It allows us to be a little darker there. And then we're going to pass this into a step node, and we pass this as an in value. So essentially the step node is doing exactly the same thing that the clip threshold is doing, but the alpha is based on this one, and the edge is going to be based on this one, which is offset a little bit. So that's what will let us use this edge width. So since we're basically doing the exact same thing, the value that comes here is actually the same one, is the dissolve. And then from here, since we actually want to have the right now basically any value that here is fully visible, we only want to have the other side visible because we only want like a little bit of an edge. So we actually need to flip it. So we go 1 minus. Finally, the value that comes from that, we multiply it by our edge color, and we put that into the emissive. Once we save, we can grab a shader graph, and right now we're at -0.3 for some reason, so this actually needs to be a positive value. So there you go. We put a positive value, and you can see a little bit of an edge out there with the HDR color. And as we move the dissolve, there you go. We get that little cool little energy edge. As is a HDR color, you can actually intensify this. So if you have a post process, it'll grab the. If you have post process with glow, it'll grab the color from the HDR and actually make it glow. So as you can see, I can go pretty extreme there and just make like cool little magic apparition for this. So that's pretty dope. And this is just with random noise values, so it is pretty simple. And we can do some tweaks immediately with this. For example, the scale of this can really change the feel of things. So if you remember, originally it had like a value of 500. If you go back to that, which is just noise, you'll see it's a totally different thing when you switch the dissolve. Right now we're just using simple noise to make the dissolve mask, but it can be whatever you want. You could use a texture, for example. Let's say you wanted to dissolve in like the shape of diamonds. You could literally have like little diamonds with gradients there, and it would dissolve like that. So let's quickly do that example. So instead of the sample noise, I'm gonna create a node and make it a sample texture 2D. And let's hook this one directly to the alpha and this directly to subtract. And I already have a little texture one, tiling diamonds is what I called it. I just made a pretty simple texture. If we look at the pattern up close, you can see it's basically a radial gradient that goes from dark to white in the shape of diamonds. So as you'd expect when you use this to dissolve, it almost looks like some things are like little diamonds are sort of spinning in there, you know? So you can use all sorts of different patterns that you can draw to make the dissolve kind of look the way you want. So I want to make a different effect where I dissolve based on the Y. So I can create a node here, say position, and that'll give me the position. In this case, I want the position within the object coordinates. That means that if I move the object, this coordinates will remain consistent. Versus if I have them against the world, which maybe is something you want, if I put them against world coordinates, when I move the object, the position will change. So in this case, I want object. Then I want to split that, because the one that I care about right now is the Y. The Y in this case goes to G. So I can just put the G into that one and put the G into this one. Let's save that. And now from dissolve here, you can see I can do pretty cool little pretty sure this is how it looks in Star Trek or something. It almost looks like I want to flip it. And also you can see once I get to the very top, this stuff is outside of the dissolve. And the reason for that is that I'm doing a dissolve right now from 0 to 1, but the height of the object is not 1. And you can see this by going into the mesh. You will be able to see the bound size. And in this case on Y it's 1.15. So this 0.15 is basically the extra that's outside. Now, I don't know of a way to get basically this number from shadergraph. And if anyone out there knows, please correct me, because I would love to know. But as far as I know, there's no way to get this. So since you cannot get it, I generally just put it into a variable when I need it. So let's add one here, and then let's say float, and let's call this object height. And since we already know what the value we want is, we're just going to put it to default to 1.15, just because we know it's the value that we want. So now to use that object, we actually need to put it in between this, and we're going to do a little division. We're going to divide our position by the height. Then we hook that up into the usual two places. And you can see now that if I go from 0 all the way to the top, it now covers the entire thing. Now, since we have the height be exact, that means that I get this little tip at the top, and I get this little extra at the bottom. So one way to solve that is to do a remap over here. So this is giving us right now a value from 0 to 1. We can grab that value, which is originally from 0 to 1, and we can remap it to like 0.05 to 0.95. So we're essentially sort of pushing the edges in a little bit. And then we grab that and we hook it up here. Let me close that for a moment, and we grab that and we put it over here. As you can see, every time we're doing things like that, we keep on like having to reconnect both of those. You could also put a float in between. That probably would have been a good choice at the beginning, but I didn't do it. So, and now when we took the material, you can see when it's at 0, you don't see any blue at all. When it's at 1, you don't see any blue at all. You start seeing it around 0.95, which is exactly what you expect because we're multiplying that by 0.95 over there. You can obviously expose that number if you want to have a little more control. For here, for example, maybe we want to flip it, so we can grab a 1 minus and rehook it into the 2 places that we have. Save the asset. And now when we tweak the dissolve at 0 is like that, and then dissolves that way. So as you can see, there's a lot you can do with this effect. At this point, for example, you can see that it's dissolving this way, but you don't see the edge over there. That's a very easy change. You can go into the graph settings and change it to a 2-sided material. This next part is not exactly dissolve related, but we're going to try and like expand the vertices of the mesh as the dissolve comes in, just to give it a little more juice. Also, if you ever want to watch more of my face, I stream on Twitch on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff. It really helps, and I appreciate it. So as you can see, when I move the dissolve up and down in this version, it will unravel the mesh, which looks pretty cool. It just adds a little bit of juice to it. I will go over how I made it, but I won't do it like step by step. So over here we have a smooth step, and this is taking the value that we've been using for fading in and stuff like that. And then it passes through a smooth step that is basically from dissolve, which if we move the bar, so dissolve is essentially at this height, and then we subtract a little bit, a 0.1, this is an arbitrary value I chose, so that would be at this height. So it's basically making like a little gradient from this point to this point. Then it's inverting it. It's adding a power, and the reason for that is because I want it to become sort of extreme here, so you can almost see how it goes up and then starts curving really quickly. That curve is because of that power. And then I multiply that by the normal vector. So the normal vector, for example, for a quad here, the normal vector would be pointing sort of towards us right now. So you can see when the things are moving out, they're getting pushed outwards because that's the direction that the normal is pointing in. So then I basically just use the normal. I multiply it. I don't want to change y because I didn't want to change like the height, because y is kind of like the position that we're using to fade things. So I just multiply on x and on z by 0.3, totally arbitrary number. If you change this number, it will change how far these things move outwards. And then I multiply that by the power that I had before. I add it to the position of the object, and then I just pass it into the position. So as you can see, there's a whole lot of things you can do here by either switching what you use to do the transition of dissolve, like a texture or noise or whatever you want, the Y, maybe the distance from the camera. That's another very common use for this. So there's a lot you can experiment with. I hope you had a good time. Hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next one. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff. Adios.
Well, thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out. Thanks for watching.